Hey, Mark, this is Faisal. How's it going with you?
Very well up here in Fresno, California. It's good to see you.
It's getting pretty good down here in LA. It's getting a little chilly, but I'm still gonna hit the surfing, put on the wetsuit and brave the cold. That's for sure.
Love it.
I like to start out with all my interviews is this one question is when somebody asks you, what do you do? How do you answer that?
You know, I answer that the shortest thing is I serve humanity. That's the shortest context I can give you. And I'm very proud of the fact that I was a paramedic for 17 years. And, that I touched humanity like you can't believe for that 17 years, 26 babies delivered. God knows how many people were resuscitated with CPR and all the shooting, stabbings, car wrecks. I mean, it was humanity from rich to poor and everybody in between. But after that, now serving humanity through nutrition and preventative medicine, it's a different way. I was in acute care intervention with people who were really critically ill or injured before. And now it's through prevention and the gut microbiome and making people healthy because their immune systems function and they're well nourished. So providing them whole food nutrition. So serving humanity with purpose, I think is the shortest, most succinct way of saying it. And it gives me tremendous happiness in my heart.
Well, that's a great answer. And then, how did you get into the dairy farming practice? What's the story
Well,
behind
I
that?
grew up on a fossil. I grew up on a dairy when I was a child. My dad was a dairyman for about 10 years. And I always loved cows. I love the whole thing with cows converting, grass into food that people could eat, and sunshine and just the whole thing, calves. And I just loved it. So when I retired from paramedic medicine, I was really looking at our farms here. My grandparents had handed down to me 1,000 acres of prime agricultural real estate out here in Fresno County. And I grew up on the farm. I knew farming well, but at the same time, I was not a professional farmer. So I looked at things differently. And I looked at who am I actually selling food to? Who am I serving? Is it a processor or is it a person? Is it people? And I realized that those that serve processors get ripped off like you can't believe. And what they're providing to the processor gets changed dramatically because it gets processed. So I started visiting with consumers directly and saying, what is it you want? And it was a real big thing. Altadena had just closed in Los Angeles. They sold in May of 1999. And there was a big gaping hole. There was no more raw milk in Los Angeles. And you had 18 million people saying, I want raw milk.
Right.
So it was clear to me that why don't I build a dairy that serves people directly? It's legal in California to do raw milk and do it with organic certifications, non-GMO, local, low carbon footprint, do all the things that consumers wanted. They wanted good for you products, whole food nutrition. They wanted it safe, tested. They wanted it from grass-fed cows. They wanted natural vitamin D. They didn't want artificial. They wanted it unprocessed. They wanted to visit me. All those things became what we now have as Raw Farm or Organic Pastures Dairy that has thrived and thrived uniquely in the last year and a half of this whole COVID thing. It's really, or a year, I should say, has really gone crazy because people recognize that raw milk is the first food of life, and it brings a baby, it builds a baby's basic microbiome and their immune system where one did not exist before birth.
Right.
And so it's a unique food in that regard that it's Mother Nature's a million years of selective pressures, generation by generation, to build this optimal food for the next generation to thrive, that all people from newborn all the way through very aged people can have the benefit in their gut at various different levels and ways. But the bottom line is everybody can really thrive by eating whole food nutrition. So that was kind of the premise of how I started Organic Pastures Dairy back in 1999 and 2000. And it's always been a growth every year because people are recognizing more and more, Weston Price and all kinds of other people growing and growing, especially with the internet being the ultimate teacher, what people can Google and find out.
Yes, true.
And all the research in the last 10 years coming out of Europe showing the profound differences between inflammatory markers and inflammation in the body, and asthma, allergies, gut microbiome, when you drink raw milk. So cap it all off, it's delicious. The first comment people say is, it's delicious. So that was the genesis of how we began. And then, of course, it's evolved and grown. And my son's now in charge. He's the president. My son, Aaron, he's got his master's from Fresno State. My daughter, she runs the social network. She's got a degree in marketing from Fresno State. My wife is retired from nursing, and now she helps out on the customer service side. So I do mostly educational outreach, and I build stuff around the dairy, and I work as a mentor with my son. And I just love what we're doing. And it's people, it's serving with people through a food that makes a real difference in their lives. And it's exciting. It's very exciting. It's very fulfilling. And it gives me a life of purpose. And I feel really good about that.
Well, that's great. I mean, I remember the first time I had raw milk, I was telling you off camera, was I felt like I was drinking a fresh vanilla milkshake. The creaminess, it was just, it put a smile on my face. And then ever since then, I would constantly, once a week get my gallon of raw milk. Um, what, when somebody asks you, who doesn't know anything about raw milk, like what is raw milk and what's the difference between that and pasteurized milk that you get at a store? What's that long answer? Yeah.
Well, let's make it a real short one, then I'll explain a little bit.
Okay.
Breast milk, human breast milk, is arguably, without question, throughout all the scientists, all the doctors, everybody around the world agrees, for the most part, 99.9% of the people agree, that it is the ultimate, most imperative food that babies get. And the question is, why? It's because it is a whole food. And in breast milk, there's a whole microbiome matrix, proteins, everything is there. And are we still live?
Oh yeah.
Okay there?
Yeah, we're still recording. I'll do some.
Okay. Zoom has ghosts, Anyway, but it's a whole food matrix, and it's bioavailable, and it's there not only to build the immune system, which protects the baby, but it also gives the full food to nourish the baby. Now, if you look at that and you realize that all mammals produce milk for their young, cows produce raw milk for their babies, and so do goats and sheep and horses and reindeer and water buffalo and camels. Yeah. And you look back at the history of man for 15,000 years, a lot of that time in the last 15,000 years around the world, mankind spent starving, didn't have enough food, right? Lack of starvation still continues today around some parts of the world, but we've only enjoyed plentiful food in the recent times. And it's interesting that one of the solutions mankind was found 15,000 years ago, or it's probably longer, but that's the recorded time we could figure out through carbon dating, was that if you had a mammal and you had some grass for that mammal to eat and sunshine and some rain once in a while, you had food today. You didn't have to hunt, fish, gather. You didn't have to do anything. You could take that food with you. And if you got really hungry, you could eat the animal too.
Right.
So bottom line is it provides milk now that is whole, complete, nourishing, and it is something that you can rely upon almost 100% to thrive. Now, we don't rely on milk 100%. We have other foods, wonderful other foods, plant-based foods, all kinds of foods. But it is a very important part of something that historically mankind has thrived when it had it available to them, to whatever culture it was. There was actually a competitive advantage that was found when you had mammalian milk, and that's always been raw milk or fermented raw milk, because it would actually become inoculated with the local cultures. The Mongolians have thrived for a long, long time with horse milk, but that's a lot of it's kefir and those fermented cheeses and things they make. So it's a traditional thing. It's a wonderful, unique combination of different mammals working together in synergy. And so it's something that we've forgotten in the last 100 years because we don't get food from a farm anymore. We get food from a store. And so you don't know your farmer. And so you don't really know where your food comes from or the things it goes through before you get to eat it. And now pasteurization has rendered milk the most allergenic food in America. The FDA website, you can look it up. Is it what's the most allergenic food? They have 10 foods, and raw milk is not there. It's pasteurized milk, number one. Raw milk is not allergenic. Neither is breast milk. It actually helps decrease allergens. It controls the cytokine reactions and the histamines and the mast cells. And the fats are really important. The animal fats are really important from breast milk. And that's something that if babies don't get those animal fats, their brains and nervous systems don't develop properly. In fact, there's been actually criminal indictments against parents that don't give their children enough fat when they're first born and when they're growing, because their brains, they go crazy. They don't have, their brain cells can't mature. So there's some real Mother Nature's blueprints I would put forward here, that raw milk is very important. And the things found in raw milk are very important to life. And yeah, there's some cultures around the world that never drank raw milk. I don't think the American Indians ever did, but they ate the things found in raw milk, lots of fermented
Right.
meats and organ meats and the things found in raw milk. The
Sure.
Eskimos, they never drank raw milk, but they ate a lot of seal blubber, and they ate a lot of fermented foods and fermented things that came from like raw eggs and things like that that they would get from fish, from fish as well as birds. So around the world, people seeked out those organ meats and those proteins and enzymes and bacteria and minerals and fats that did come from animals, with fish or fowl or mammals, and raw milk was one of those foods.
All right. And I'm sure you have the answer for this one. If you compare the nutrient, if you compare the nutrients between raw milk and pasteurized milk, what is it?
Nutrients. It's interesting when you look at the label of a pasteurized dairy product and a raw dairy product, they look kind of similar.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because they don't look at bioavailability.
Right.
They look at, this is how much vitamins are found. That's it. This is how much minerals are found. That's it. This is how much. Interesting that they have to put back the vitamin D because it's destroyed almost entirely from pasteurization. And the bioavailability of the micronutrients, like the amino acids, fatty acids, and things, are reduced dramatically in pasteurized milk. In fact, we have a chart we use to educate people, and it shows the comparison between breast milk and raw milk, and then pasteurized. And it's just dramatic, the differences that happen when you heat the raw whey protein, for instance. When you heat it up above 140 degrees, the raw whey protein, it no longer acts as an anti-inflammatory agent in your body. Raw whey is one of the proteins found in raw milk. It's just interesting, the bioavailability, the complete microbiome integrity of the food matrix is completely changed when processing. So the label doesn't tell the story, because the label just shows a number of a lab test of a particular thing found in the milk. But whether that's available to the body or not is completely different subject matter. In fact, Europe now, Oxford, England, they're doing some work on labeling that shows bioavailability
Oh,
of the
wow.
food you're eating. Yep.
That's
That's
great.
going to be a little bit down the road for us because we're not into that.
Sure.
Processors don't get into explaining how their food is deficient.
Well, it's not going to help them. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's not going to help at all. They're going to have to find ways to ferment the food. They're going to have to find ways to process it less, make it more enzymatically active, make sure that it's biologically diverse, so the bacteria are alive. Killing bacteria, yeah, it may reduce the food safety risks because of the filthy conditions that we have with pathogens and things on some operations where we have to get rid of that and people get sick. But at the same time, killing bacteria creates a very inflammatory environment. The bacterial, the things inside of the cell are lysed. The cell membrane is lysed and the internal cell contents get spilled out. Your body does not recognize that as something helpful. And it reacts and says, get that out of here, it's waste. Mm-hmm. So we have, when you start killing using 5-log reductions and pasteurization to kill things, you actually start creating a lot of inflammatory problems. What we need to do is clean up our act, pay the farmers well, create conditions where pathogens are not prevalent, and then build the immune system of the host. So the host, the receiver of the food, actually has a stronger immune system. And we can also use very advanced safety and technology to test and validate and verify that, in fact, a bad bug is not present. And we do that here at Organic Pastures Dairy because we have BACS PCR and other tests that we do on a daily basis to assure that the milk is safe, that might not make the most depressed immune system out there, somebody might have it, sick. So there's a way of combining Mother Nature's blueprints along with modern technology to be able to serve humanity as it presents itself today, which is kind of sick. People are pretty sick.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused or surprised that I didn't realize they had to add vitamin D back into the milk after they pasteurize it. So now the question is, what's the quality of the vitamin D they're putting in? Is that a valid question? Because it could be, I mean, does the FDA, do they tell those dairy farmers this is the type of vitamin D you got to put in, or is vitamin D just vitamin D?
No, vitamin D is not vitamin D. There's actually a synthetic form of vitamin D that they add, and I'm not sure which kind it is because I'm not an expert in that.
Sure.
The bottom line is they do add in a synthetic form of vitamin D, and it's been shown to not be as bioavailable,
right? Of course.
Not as body friendly as the natural form that comes directly from the cows in sunshine.
Wow, that's a freaking red flag right there. I mean, that bothers me.
Oh, the red flags are all over the place. The red flags are, if you're a CPA, I mean, you know numbers, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty hardcore. The economic dollar voting is a massive red flag. If you look at consumption of fluid pasteurized milk, it looks like a ski slope. it's going downhill because of the fact that it's not full fat. It's been pasteurized. It's been rendered to be a shelf life friendly product, but not a gut life friendly product.
Okay. All
And
right.
so why would you consume something that tastes a little bit burned and it has all these synthetic things added into it? And it's been rendered fairly sterile. And the bacteria have not been removed. They're still there, and they render it to become very inflammatory and triggers allergies. So why would you want to eat the most allergenic food in America? And so you see that trend, that dollar line voting of consumers. They're just purely saying, no more milk for me. They don't even know about raw milk. So when you introduce raw milk, it's an educational challenge for them to come up to speed and understand that raw milk is so different. Yes, they're 120, 130 years ago. A lot of people died from consumption of raw milk in certain areas. Absolutely, that's true. Water quality, no flushing toilets, typhoid, tuberculosis. It was a disaster. But you know what? People weren't dying from milk on a green grass pasture out in the countryside. It was the downtown breweries, distillers' grains fed cows in these areas that were filthy in Chicago, New York, Boston, Philadelphia. Boston Commons was a muddy mess with distillers' grains being fed to these cows that are so unhealthy. It was disgusting. And that's the kind of milk that actually gave a black eye to raw milk in the 1800s. But the solution was always prevalent. We always knew what it was, and that was sunshine, green grass, clean water in environments where the cows could actually do well and eat what they're supposed to eat. And when you had that, that milk would actually heal and cure people. And there's all kinds of history about physicians using raw milk as a wonderful preventative food, which is important to boost immune systems all through the 1800s and all the way up through the 1900s to 1940 and 50, it was talked about, until it became politically incorrect because of the pressures from processors that wanted to gather all the milk, get it cheap, and put it in a processing plant and put their brand on it and make some money. So there's a lot of economics along with politics that go with this. And right now, we've got this wonderful justice. It has some interesting dark sides to it, but it's called the internet.
Right.
Where people can figure out what they want to figure out. And we've got a lot of educational outreach going on. They can validate and confirm that, yes, the NIH, the CDC have peer-reviewed articles showing the value of raw milk from Europe, mostly the studies there, and also the safety of raw milk, 2 big peer-reviewed articles in the last 2 years. So the evidence is coming forward, and the most important evidence is the experience of the consumer themselves.
All right, fair enough. Now, if a person who's not educated about raw milk, when they go to Pavilions or Ralph's or Whole Foods, but then they go to like Erewhon or the other places or Sprouts and they see raw milk, as a mom or a father of kids, so they're going to be like, well, is raw milk safe? Mm-hmm. But you also, your company as well, Organic Pastures, you all set the safety standards for the raw milk industry. Is that safe to say? Or
yes
helps?
and no.
Okay.
The state of California has set the standards for California. We've gone far beyond those standards. Let's put it that way. They required no pathogens in the milk and low coliform numbers and those kinds of things. That's step one. We go way far behind it. The state of California requires no testing on the farm. They do the only testing required, but we do several hundred tests a month. So we've gone far beyond because we want to serve humanity well. We want to make sure that there's no bad bugs in the milk. And it's extremely rare that we find bad bugs. We find them once in a while. We find them before the milk ever gets to the consumer. So we actually were able to stop that because we get the data back within 24 hours and we can do it in the plant and stop it. And that's happened very rarely, but a couple of times in the last 5 years, we've been able to do that. And there's never been a problem because of the fact we do that. But we do that in excess of what the state of California requires because we understand the moral and ethical responsibilities we have for our customers ourselves. So the humanity part of this, the compassion, is that we're going to serve them with good food, not something that might make them ill. And the food is incredibly powerful with building the immune system and nourishing. So that said, the Raw Milk Institute, which is a nonprofit that I work with, has actually designed a whole group of common standards that are now being used internationally in UK, across Canada, in the United States, and even down under in Australia, have been adopted by those that are doing raw milk in the most advanced way, and actually are doing testing on a frequent basis, have on-farm labs, all kinds of stuff to assure that customers are served and not made ill. It's not common to get ill from raw milk, but it's possible. It's a low potential, but it's possible. And what we've done is taken that potentiality to near zero. At the same time, having tremendous value that in fact it prevents and actually reduces asthma like crazy. irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, all those things are improved like you can't believe. Inflammation in the body, those kinds of things are really powerful as far as something that consumers can actually have as a value to them.
And then, Mark, should one be wary that is there a big difference between Organic Pastures raw milk and then raw milk from the farm down the street?
Well, there's not too many farms down the street.
Well, yeah.
In California, I believe there's only 5 dairies that hold a permit to produce and sell raw milk. All of them are tested once a month from the state of California. So they're meeting a basic benchmark. And for the most part, the safety history has been pretty good. There's been a couple little exceptions here and there. But at the same time, I obviously really encourage those that are interested in raw milk to go to the dairy that is Raw Milk Institute listed.
Okay.
Organic Pastures is one of them. There's a couple of small micro dairies that are also listed here in California that actually sell raw milk to people on the farm that are listed and do the testing and have that additional testing standard. But I support all raw milk producers, but just be aware that the standards the state of California set are good, they're solid, but they're basic. There's some dairies that go far beyond that to have an exceptional level.
And then how about nursing and raw milk? Feeding our babies with raw milk. What's your opinion on that one?
We always 100% encourage mothers to breastfeed their babies as long as they can. We've also found out, my daughter was a perfect example when she had her one of our grandsons 5 years ago now, little Justin. He was so ravenous, he wanted so much milk from her and she just couldn't produce it. So she did some research and she did a little study and she found that the more raw milk she drank herself, the more her breast became engorged and she produced raw milk for the baby. So she has a video up that's called Raw Milk In, Raw Milk Out. And it's pretty cool because within 48 hours, 2 days of consuming extra amounts of raw milk, like a half gallon of raw milk a day, her milk production went through the roof. Wow.
But I did not know that at all. I mean, it looks like raw milk is winning left and right.
My own milk production's gone way up because of the way I've been consuming raw milk. Babies thrive on raw milk. 3 to 6 months, mom's breast milk, and then they can go right on to raw milk. That's not a big problem at all.
All right. And then, because nowadays the word microbiome is popping up everywhere. Gut health for your immunity with COVID and whatnot. Can you just expand on that? And you did talk about it in the past, the relationship of raw milk to the microbiome, and then the microbiome in general. What is it? Why should we take care of it?
I am part of the International Milk Genomics Consortium. International Milk Genomics Consortium is the PhD level researchers that work here at UC Davis in California and collaborate with multiple universities around the world to do advanced research on breast milk. And they look at raw milk and they look at breast milk and they talk about the microbiome of the body. And they say, okay, what is the microbiome? Well, if you look at what makes us genomically human, there's a great TED Talk by Dr. Bonnie Basler. She's an MIT researcher, Princeton University, MIT, that actually was part of that whole human genome research project to figure out what we are genomically, what DNA makes us human. The most shocking thing that came out about that was in 2002, when they actually discovered the human genome, was that the majority of the genetics of what makes us human in this life actually comes from the bacteria on and in our bodies, not from mom and dad and 23andMe. The genetics that mom and dad gave you sperm and egg when you're born. No, the majority, and there's an argument whether it's 60% or 95%, but a massive majority of the genetic information, which actually drives us to be healthy and to function properly and gives us all of our wonderful traits, wonderful activities, I should say. The traits come from mom and dad, but the activities, what you do with the genomics, the genes from mom and dad, has to do with the bacteria that actually share their genomic information at the cellular level. And in fact, we can define autoimmune diseases as the lack of the microbiome being present in its diversity. When you become too clean, your body reacts to itself and starts attacking itself because it's kind of too clean stupid. It doesn't have the genomic bandwidth to actually function properly. And that the healthiest people on earth are those that have genomic or genetic bandwidth. They have biodiversity of good bacteria They can share their genetic information with our human cells to keep them going properly straight, keep them on the straight and narrow in terms of what they're supposed to do. And it really makes you think about life on Earth differently. The first forms of life on Earth were the archaeobacteria. And the scientists tell us that the archaeobacteria are the foundations of all life on Earth. So if you look at our genomic beginnings, we are bacteriosapiens. We just look like humans, but we're not. We are humans in form because of our evolutionary traits that we were given by all the choices that made over 1 billion years. But the bottom line is, at the core of our foundation, we are bacteriosapiens, and we need good bacteria to do every function that we're supposed to function properly. And the specialized functions come from the fact that we're genomically human. But the genome itself is the microbiome, the microbial bacterial diversity is something we get from our food, from hugs, kisses, air, soil, cats and dogs. The environment we're in reflects that. And we have sterilized it or limited it to a point with cleansing ourselves inside and out with antibiotics and Purell and purified foods and all the other things that we've become very autoimmune challenged. And a lot of people theorize that cancer is part of that. Because it's one of the inflammatory things that happens when you become really sterilized and your body can't function properly. So I'm not suggesting we all go wallow in manure and become filthy dirty, but I am suggesting that we are missing our microbiome integrity in terms of the diversity of bacteria that we need in order to thrive. And by the way, that bacteria needs whole food to thrive. It eats whole food. It doesn't eat preservatives in food because preservatives kill bacteria. That's what preservatives do. They extend shelf life. So the microbiome is becoming so important because it is important in terms of taking care of it and nourishing it.
How do you build it? I mean, just in layman terms, how do you build and maintain your microbiome?
If you look at this thing from birth forward, being born through the birth canal, that bacteria actually is the first inoculum to the outside of the body. Then mother putting the baby in the breast, the colostrum gives all the good bacteria as well as antibodies from mom to baby. And by the way, that process is not sterile. All that, those juices from that delivery process get on the mother's breast and the baby sucks it in and goes into the gut. That's the first inoculum to actually build the first microbiome. And then raw milk, actually from mom, nourishes the microbiome and gives it all kinds of interesting strengths because the bifidobacteria are encouraged because the oligosaccharides suppress pathogens, encourage the bifidobacteria and the pH, all kinds of crazy things go on. They're beyond your wildest imagination to actually have a baby become strong because of the relationship with mother in raw milk and colostrum and the birth canal. As people grow, as babies grow and children grow, it's whole food nutrition that should be consumed. Whole foods, whether they're meat, bone broths, whether they're vegetables, fermented vegetables, all those things are whole, not processed or with any kind of antibiotics or preservatives in them. Because remember, you're trying to preserve that diversity of good bacteria in the gut that are part of the basic biome that makes you what you are and how you function. And as you grow older and older, the more diversity you can keep your food, and the more you can enhance that good bacterial colony that lives in you and on you, and stay away from things that sterilize you or that limit bacteria. You can certainly wash off with clean water, great, no problem. But don't go sudsing yourself in a bunch of Purell. You really cause all kinds of problems with your skin, drying it out and so on and so forth. And in your gut, it's really critical that you nourish it with whole food nutrition because that's the food that the bacterial diversity thrive on. And when you're taking antibiotics like candy and not thinking about the aftermath of them, and remember, antibiotics save lives, there's no question, but they also put lives in jeopardy because we don't handle the aftermath properly. So we have to really be thinking about our gut microbiome as a core to our prevention of health. How are we going to prevent disease and stay healthy is right at the core is the gut microbiome, which is nutrition 100%.
Well, when you're saying the aftermath, just from my own understanding, it's based that a lot of people have a poor diet. They get sick, they take antibiotics, and then they get back on their poor diet versus having a whole food diet to rebuild the microbiome. Is that correct?
That's exactly right, Faisal. It's exactly right.
All right.
And that doesn't mean that you would never take an antibiotic. There are some bad bugs that might just take you out if you don't take them. But Antibiotics don't kill off all the bacteria in the body, but they certainly sort through and reduce the population of good bacteria. There's no question. But what you need to do is actively replace them. You actively get into the raw milk kefirs, the kombuchas, yogurts, those things that are really good for the gut microbiome and the diversity. Maybe a pinch of dirt once in a while.
Yeah.
Make sure you've got the pets and cats and things around you. Get out in the sunshine. Really restore that diversity of bacteria and feed it well. And that way you don't get sick again, like on a roller coaster. You hear this all the time where children get ear infections. They get antibiotics, amoxicillin. They get ear infections 8 weeks later because the conditions did not change in their bodies and the antibiotics are no longer there to kill off the bacteria. So you get inflammation. Lots of sugar causes inflammation. And what do you got? You got this roller coaster from hell. That actually the child has a degrading and then asthma comes on, and you got inflammation with this and that and the other problem, more ear infections. And so it's degrading the human microbiome to the point where it can no longer function like it's supposed to protect itself. And that's really something we need to be. And I think that the better medical schools are actually starting to teach this, but there's a conflict in terms of the interests of the big pharmaceutical companies that like to sell their antibiotics, right? Mm-hmm. So there's all this economic influence in terms of evolution of what's good for people versus what's good for doctors' pockets or pharmaceutical companies. And it's really important to get a balance that we're here to serve people. And that means preventing disease and optimizing health.
Right. Well, that's a great answer. Now with COVID and COVID being in the limelight now, vitamin D is getting another look. What makes vitamin D so important?
Vitamin D is very anti-inflammatory, and it's critical for bodily functions to have good natural vitamin D to decrease inflammation and keep your immune system functioning properly. The killer T cells, by the way, are born as naive immune cells. Killer T cells don't actually function to go kill things at birth. They're actually trained by, guess what? Bacteria. Bifidobacteria actually train killer T cells to become good functioning paramilitary operators, and without the good bacteria, the killer T cells actually don't get fully functioning as far as immune cells are concerned. And we see that all the time. The university research is very, very clear about this, that you really need to have these good bifidobacteria in the gut and nourish them with the oligosaccharides and all the specialized sugars found in raw milk. It actually gets them to function properly, to have killer T cells be fully functioning warriors. And what we have is incomplete immune systems, both on the innate immune system side, which is all the stuff that we're born with that immediately protect us, like skin and mucus. But at the same time, the adaptive immune system. The adaptive immune system is the antibody function, the killer T cells, those things that actually become reacting to the environment. When you get attacked by something bad, they come to your defense and become the everlasting residual protective force. So you have the innate immune system and you have the protective adaptive immune systems that function. And both those systems require a healthy body to work within. And the adaptive immune system is particularly sensitive to things like raw milk, because raw milk is always getting the adaptive immune system function to kind of exercise. They're doing the immune system push-ups because raw milk has a biodiversity of bacteria. So what's it do? It goes in and says, stirs up a little bit of a battle all the time, saying, okay, I'm a bad bug or I'm a weird bug. Come fight me, and you'll have antibodies to more diversity. So, sterilized foods don't bring that practice to your body. So you don't want to have a battle all the time. You don't want to have inflammation all the time, but a little bit here and there actually stirs the ability for your body to function and protect itself. So that's not something you'll get from pasteurized milk. You get that from raw milk.
All right. Drink more raw milk and your cheese then.
Yes.
When I say the name Weston Price,
yep.
What's your answer? What are your thoughts?
Well, he did some very brilliant work around the world in the early 1900s. He's a dentist that went to Switzerland and other places around the world and looked at tribes of people that had whole food diets. And he saw those that consumed raw milk and those that did not. But in every case, they all had a whole food diet and they lived close to the soil. They lived close to the animals and close to the soil and close to the earth. And what he found was that they had a much higher level of optimal health when they ate those kinds of diets and lived long lives and did much better. They had better teeth because he was a dentist. He was kind of dental, focused in terms of what he was doing. So one picture of this is the Weston Price people and Price Pottinger and those people that actually did that work. But there's other people as well, other scientists now, and even in more recent, more historic context, actually show that whole food nutrition is highly protective of humans, and that the raw milk played a part of that. And where you didn't have raw milk, the things found in raw milk, the biodiversity of bacteria, the good fats, the enzymes, the minerals, all those things, the proteins, all those things found in raw milk were consumed. Raw milk was just a very unique, easy to eat package that had it all. But if you didn't have the package, then you'll go find the package in whatever you would have in the environment.
All right. And have you done analysis like how many different enzymes or the probiotic viewpoint of the quality of raw milk?
Oh, yeah. There are 2,500 proteins found in raw milk and breast milk. There are 700 different kinds of bacteria found in normal, fresh, clean breast milk, raw milk from people. Enzymes, there's uncounted numbers and hundreds of different kinds of enzymes, which they synthesize reactions in the body. It's a unique food, and it boggles the mind because you have to think about Mother Nature's evolutionary pressures over 1 million years, that the bad died off and the good thrived. That was the choice at every generation. And raw milk is the expressed example of its ultimate result, that Mother Nature didn't want mankind to die off, and only selected the best food to start life, and that was breast milk or raw milk for all the mammals. And as a result, we've really kind of taken that food, that fantastic food, and killed it with pasteurization. We've solved a problem by not cleaning up the problem, but by killing it. And it is eliminated and reduced a lot of the dramatic value that you find in Mother Nature's blueprints of 1 million years of evolutionary pressures, generation by generation.
Well, for the audience, you're saying there's 2,500 enzymes, right?
Proteins.
Protein. How is that compared to pasteurized milk?
Well, there's the same number of proteins in pasteurized milk. It's just they're all denatured.
Okay, yeah.
They're not functional. They're not able to do the thing. There's all kinds of proteins, and some of them have very important biological function. Lactoferrin is a protein. There's an enzyme in raw milk. Lactase enzymes are proteins. These are all denatured, and the enzymes are proteins, by the way. So they're made up of proteins. When you denature them, they're no longer functional. They can no longer do their intended practice, their intended what they're supposed to do. Their function has changed. They're dysfunctional. They've been denatured. So things found in raw milk are found there on purpose, not by mistake. They're put there because that's Mother Nature's design for 1 million years. And so there's just a lot there. You look at enzymes, minerals, proteins, bacteria, fats, all those things are changed dramatically in heat and processing. Some changed more than others. Some are more stable than others, but all of them are affected in some way.
That's a great answer. And one thing a lot of people do talk about, especially in the naturopathic community, is how Europe's agriculture standards are much different from the US. Can you give us a little insight about that? And then also, why is it that? There's your answer. Money.
Money. There are committees within our USDA, within our government, that sit around a table and decide what we're going to eat. They're going to decide what they're going to promote, what they're going to say is good, and what they're going to say is bad. And they have the food pyramid that they come with it, or the pie, or whatever they call it. And they're always struggling to get the biggest piece of it, because the industries thrive or die as a result of it. So we really have a economic conflict of interest when it comes to food in America, where most other countries, in Europe especially, they've eliminated some of that because they've really looked at more of a social welfare, like what's best for all of us versus some of us. And the grant funding that goes to the research comes from the government, not from industry, for the most part. There's exceptions. So it's like, let's figure out what's best for us versus what's going to make some individual rich. That's the conflict we have between the US and Europe. And I've seen that when I go to Denmark, Aarhus, Denmark, and the International Milk Genomics. I've been there twice, where they talk about this conflict of interest between industry versus what's good for people. And there's a massive disconnect between Europe and the United States because of that.
All right. And if you had to redo the food pyramid, how would you build it?
I would build it on whole food nutrition. I would look at kind of the blue zones around the world where people live to be 100 years old without a lot of disease or problems. You would actually encourage the consumption of fermented foods, whole foods. Make sure that good fats, I'm not talking about bad fats, hydrogenated crap. I'm talking about good fats, fats from cows grazed on pastures and the good omega-3 fatty acid 6 ratios. I would look at natural systems that work very, very well and extract from that the best blueprints for all of us to thrive on. And from that, you would find a pyramid that would actually be based in evidence, be based on the blue zones, for instance, that we know that around the world where people live to be very old without having a lot of illness or disease. And that new food pyramid would actually have lots of diversity in it, but it would actually be whole, not processed.
And could you explain a little bit more about the blue zones? Because quite a few in, is it Greece or
Yes.
in that area? Then the point for the audience is that they have a high number of people that live beyond the age of 100, correct?
Correct. And what's interesting is there are certainly influences there which are very important. They're all located in the Mediterranean bandwidth around the world. They're equatorial, they're not super, super north or super south. So they have some vitamin D, natural from the sun. They also have generally a lower stress lifestyle. And I'd say that is general. Loma Linda is actually considered a blue zone as well. A lot of Seventh-day Adventists that live there and a lot of people that embrace a whole food lifestyle. But interesting to hear in California, they have a blue zone that's near Loma Linda,
Wow.
California. But they all have a spiritual centering. People feel spiritually whole and feel good. A lot of love, a lot of sharing, a lot of community. A lot of whole foods, a lot of locally raised foods, fermented foods, like good cheeses. Cheeses are whole food and they're also fermented. So the bioavailability of the natural nutrients is very high. Fish, grass-fed meats, fermented dairy, especially cheeses. Wines, which is a fermented food from the local wines. And a low stress environment with sunshine and love of community seems to be, for the majority, kind of the greater picture of what a blue zone kind of looks like.
Okay. And then this is going to be a very rookie question on my part. Your cheeses, are they fermented? Like what kind of process do they go through?
For the most part, all cheeses are fermented.
Okay.
Fermentation is the bacterial action on food to break it down and make it more bioavailable. Culturing is also fermented. The word culturing, yogurts are cultured and fermented in that context. There's probably a more defined term for fermentation in terms of making acidifying things, but nonetheless, yes, our cheeses are unusual in that we use the same super high quality milk that we use in our dairy product, fluid milk. So it's not a low quality milk that you bring in from someplace that you're going to make into cheese, because that's what they do with low quality milks, is make cheese out of them, because you can't make fluid milk because it's too stinky or something. It has wrong bacteria. What we do is we use super high quality milk in our cheese, and we add in the cultures, the bacteria that causes the fermentation process to occur as in the culturing process. And the milk is never warmed above 100 degrees, which is body temperature, 99.8. It's never raised above that. So all the enzymatic activity is optimized. All the bacterial diversity is optimized. Nothing is killed. Everything is built and encouraged to grow. And we can do that because you have clean raw milk. Now, if you have super dirty raw milk and you bring it in and put it in the vat, you couldn't do that because the bacteria in there would dominate and the cultures that you would add wouldn't work because there's bacterial competition within the matrix of making cheese and the curd. So super high quality milk going into a cheese vat, adding in a bunch of additional bacterial diversity to create cheddar cheese, which is truly raw. There are raw cheeses out there that are sold as raw, when in fact, they've been taken right below pasteurization temperature and they still call it raw, but it's not. What they've done is taken low quality milk, put it in the vat, then they kill it off with 135. It's called thermalization. Kill it off with bacteria, gets reduced in its count so that the cultures work. but they call that a raw cheese, but in fact, it's not raw. It's been thermalized. Ours is truly raw. There are other truly raw cheeses in America. We're not the only one, but they're rare, not common. There's a lot of raw cheeses that have been thermalized, but those are the ones that have lost their whey protein. They don't have all the good functional bacteria and good functional protein. The alkaline phosphatase enzyme is no longer functional because it's been heated. And as a result, it is more like a pasteurized cheese. And it's still okay, but you're still not getting that whole food that really your gut thrives on.
You're not getting that bang for the buck, in other words, compared
Exactly.
to organic pastures cheeses.
Yep. Exactly.
Speaking of which, what are some projects you guys could talk about that you're working on, for organic pastures?
Well, we've replanted all of our pastures. Right now, we've gone in and laser planed them all so the water flows more properly. We can actually conserve our water and it goes farther. We have a diversity of animals. We have Jerseys and Holsteins and Jersey Holstein crosses. So we have a mixture of different animals to ensure that the milk has got all the diversity of the benefits from all breeds of animals versus just one or two. Not that one or two is bad. It's just that we found the diversity really helps. And that's one of the organic principles that we have. We're non-GMO project certified. All the feeds we get in are tested. That's not something required by law, by the organic law. In fact, you don't have to do any GMO testing at all for organic. Well, we do intensive testing every day in our own on-farm lab here to make sure that we don't have any Roundup in the milk, in the feed that gets into the milk. Roundup is a very toxic antibiotic, and we know that now it's causing all kinds of cancers. And that's because of the disruption that it caused within our genome and our microbiome. So we are really intensively concentrating on being local, being non-GMO, grazing our cows on organic green pastures, and educational outreach to consumers about whole foods. And we also work with other farmers to see if they can join us as well here and in other states, because we know it's a thriving community and people are really doing well with it on the farm and in their gut, in the community as well, because they see it in their own families, evidence in their own experience in life.
All right. And then what is one thing you wish the population would know about running a farm?
If you want to be successful, in my humble opinion, you need to be consumer connected. The farms that are their processor connected are having one hell of a time, and a lot of them are going out of business. Export is not a place you want to focus on, although exporting is fine. But I would not rely on export to be your basic farm plan. I would, this is my advice to any farmer out there is be careful about who you sell to, because if it's volatile or they don't love you, it's a question whether they're going to be here tomorrow. I'm a very big proponent of being consumer connected in some way.
That's a beautiful answer. That's a great answer. If you had to, because with your many years in running a farm, now, this next generation you're handing over the torch. So you've seen a lot of farms be successful and you've seen a lot of farms that failed. What are the 5 traits? What did you tell your son? This is what it takes to run a farm.
Well, my son and I are very, very close, and so are my daughter and I. So he received his information over 37 years of osmosis.
Right.
He absorbed it by being 1 foot away from me for many, 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 many years. So it's in his soul that you keep things clean, hot, green, and all these things that are so important. That the clean, green, hot, cold. All those things are so important in terms of growing and managing your vertically integrated operation from grass to glass. Food safety is number 1. Being whole food is number 2, right there. And consumer connection, super important. Ethical, moral, doing the right thing always, even if it hurts you financially, do it, because it will always be the right thing in the long term. You'll sleep well at night. But I would say a quote that I had from a USDA inspector that asked me once. He goes, "You know what? I only need to ask you one question to know if you're sustainable or not. What's your next generation doing? Because if your next generation is gone, you're done. You're done. When you die, your farm is going to be sold. So when I die, I'm going to be so darn happy. I'm 59 years old. I got a long ways to go.
Heck
the
yeah,
bottom
you
line
do.
is I am overjoyed the fact that the next generation is passionate, excited, driven, educated, has the right fundamentals, the right morals, the right ethics, the right farm plan to function properly, to serve people, to serve humanity, all walks of life. I don't care what color, background, it doesn't matter who you are. We serve the rainbow, everyone. And we hope to bring enlightenment and consciousness and health and nutrition to everyone to make humanity a better place. And we want other farmers to do that as well.
So you be writing a book or what? Have you ever thought about doing that?
I've thought about it. I've done a lot of writing myself. I've done a lot of writing. I do a lot of internet content creation. I do a lot of reports. I work with the Raw Milk Institute to do a lot of educational outreach. My childhood is a chapter we could have a whole interview about, which is absolutely fascinating, which brought me to where I am today. But my dad was kind of an interesting guy. He was a big anti-war, anti-Vietnam guy, and I got drug along with him through the late 60s and early 70s. So I got a lot of kind of some humanity in that as well, in terms of fighting for what's right early on in my life. So I don't fear a lot of that crap that other people might fear. Mm-hmm. And I always feel like I want to stand up for what's right. And I've got a little mantra: show up, stand up, and speak up. Show up, stand up, and speak up. And do your homework. Always stay in school. You want to hang out with people a lot smarter than you are. And you want to make them a part of your community. And that's why I go to the university research people all the time to really learn what's going on. And they are unabashedly extremely excited about their research they do about breast milk and raw milk from moms, from humans. They don't do a lot of raw milk research from cows because the processors don't give them any money, and they'll cut off their grant money here in the United States. But they'll really, really research breast milk, which is another mammal's production. So you get a tremendous amount of crossover of information from mothers and humans as a species versus cows, or goats or sheep. And so I take that information and we build on that. And then the university research coming out of Europe fortifies that as well. But I'm really, really very happy and very fulfilled, and a life of purpose. Pretty cool stuff.
All right. And Mark, I know you're very busy. I have maybe 3 or 4 more questions, maybe another 10 more minutes. Sure. But one thing that popped to my head is, you know a lot of people in the breast milk world. Is there an issue of breast milk health quality in the United States?
Yes, and there's even a bigger issue that's really become right at the forefront of those that are pioneering in breast milk. And the reason that breast milk is becoming such an important thing is that the scientists realize that it's incredibly important. It is the gold standard for researching the human genome because all the things found in it support the human genome. So to understand breast milk is really a huge advancement in understanding what builds the human genome, because if it's found in breast milk, it's there for a reason. Mother Nature put it there for a reason, and if you understand that, you understand the correlations to the human body. I really think that I forgot your question. I want to answer it. What was it again? I'm sorry.
Is there a health concern on the quality of breast milk for American women?
I know where I was going now. Breast milk is banked. It's put in breast milk banks. It's frozen. And mothers contribute milk to the breast milk banks, and they pasteurize it and they freeze it for use in hospitals. Well, they're starting to realize that pasteurized breast milk doesn't work. It may give the food to the baby, but it doesn't nourish the microbiome. In fact, it's very inflammatory. It causes an inflammation in the body, and it doesn't have all those functional proteins that actually make the baby's body work properly. And so the better scientists, the better researchers are looking to get mothers that have been pre-screened for tuberculosis and whatever, HIV or whatever, to make sure that they're qualified donors and use that milk raw for babies, and they get much better outcomes. The babies thrive much better. Okay. So the most advanced science right now is, let's treat breast milk like blood. A blood bank doesn't pasteurize. They test the donor. Duh, right? Mm-hmm. Let's test the donor of the breast milk to make sure she doesn't have tuberculosis or HIV or some other disease that you may want to have not go through to someone as a baby. But the bottom line is, raw milk is much like blood in that regard. And the science is really kind of championing a new world of breast milk banking, which is raw milk banking from humans versus pasteurized. So there are some challenges there, but we hear the most advanced technology and the most advanced scientists addressing this, saying, wait a minute, we really need to address this issue.
Well, I don't know if maybe I misheard you, but how about nursing moms? How about moms who are just breastfeeding their kids? Is there issues with health
Yes.
for that milk health as well? Are you hearing that with your research or with your peer group?
Yes. Every mother produces a milk for their baby, and that milk is specially engineered from mom to baby because there's a feedback loop between the mother to the baby. The baby suckles on the breast and actually gives information up through the nipple into the mammary gland that the mother responds to give the necessary things back to the baby. So if, let's say there's a bacteria found in the baby's mouth, that is going to be shared with the mother, and the mother creates an antibody to that bacteria and actually gives the baby the antibody because the baby doesn't have an antibody factory that's functioning up to speed yet. So the mother is an antibody factory for the baby. But the quality of the milk based on the nutrition of the mother is a very big challenge, because if a mother is disregarding her own nutrition, then what does breast milk? Breast milk takes from the mother to give to the baby. It's a taking and giving. The baby doesn't give a lot back to the mother. There's a few things they do, but not much. It's a harvesting of the resources that mom has. It takes muscle, it takes proteins from muscles, it takes calcium from bones, it takes magnesium. It actually is a draw on the mother. So it is absolutely imperative that mothers that are not only getting ready to become pregnant, pre-pregnancy, when they're pregnant, and when they're nursing, absolutely need to have the highest and best nutrition. That includes whole food nutrition. Well, you don't hear a lot about that. You hear a little bit, but take your folate, vitamin or something.
Sure.
But you're not hearing eat a whole food diet and stay off the Pepsi, Coke, and don't take antibiotics, and nourish your microbiome, because you're going to soon share it with your baby. Let me tell you what. We have a long ways to go, and the naturopathic doctors, the DOs of the world, the better medical schools dominate in this area, and they're trying to push it. But you know what? When you've got a doctor that spends 7 minutes with a patient, and they're not going to get into why are you obese, or why are you so sugar dependent? Why is your yeast inflammation going crazy because of sugar consumption? You don't spend a lot of time with a patient, because the way the doctors make money is get a lot of people through your office. Then the educational challenge is really a huge mountain. And this is becoming multi-generational now, because our great-great-grandparents probably would have told us this. In fact, there's cultures around the world where mothers, before they become pregnant, pre-marriage, there's this whole thing about what you do to prepare yourself for childbirth and having children. And for the young men as well, so their sperm works right.
Right.
I mean, we got a big problem here. Mother Nature's saying, shut that line down. It's not working because you're not eating properly. You're not revering the blueprints I've given you for a million years. It's too stupid to be propagated. You better change course or die off. I mean, that's the big picture.
Yeah.
And so we really need to take heed of that. We're smart people. We think we are anyway. Let's start eating a whole food diet. Let's start nourishing the next generation. Let's start educating our young to have some regard for how they're fit. They get sunshine and exercise and good food so they can have a healthy next generation. We've never seen 1 in 50 kids being born with, ADD and autism. My God, where's that going to take us? Who's going to do the work in the future? Who's going to think? Who's going to lead our country? We got a problem, and it's in this generation. We need to fix it quickly.
Yeah, and just for context, because Weston Price talks a lot about that, I think he at least has a minimal chapter about how different indigenous people around the world spend time on pre-birth, on eating organ meat, seafood, raw fish eggs and whatnot to make sure they're ready to have kids. And they have kids every 2 years, so it gives the mother time to recoup. And if I have this right, the name of the book is A Nutritional and Physical Degeneration. You probably you have a signed copy back there. You won an auction.
Right here, buddy. There it is.
I read it twice. I definitely could read it a couple more times, learn, and then
there's another one, Pottinger. But yeah, these are the basics, the very basics of human nutrition, is in these historical recounting of those tribes or cultures that embrace those and had a very good multi-generation succession of healthy people.
Yeah, and you see an analysis. I mean, like liver is the superfood of all superfoods. Raw milk is past 50 minutes. It's one of the healthiest things you could drink to maintain your your physical being and your immune system. If you had $100 million, what kind of research would you fund?
Well, I'm biased. I would
It's
research,
okay.
obviously. I would do a huge study of 10,000 people and look at the impact of whole food nutrition on them, and reduction of antibiotics, and encouraging biodiversity in the gut, and raw milk and fermented raw milks. I would completely redo the American dairy system, to assure that dairies were becoming more producers for people versus processors. I would certainly try to engage the USDA, which is the food pyramid people, and get leadership at the top of the USDA to think about we, the people, being nourished versus the voices which are loudest, which are the processors, which tend to get the policies and procedures that influence their profit. Access to politics and power has a lot to do with the voices of what actually gets trickled down through the food chain. But there's a kind of a balancing act right now with the internet speaking very loudly, with consumers that are becoming educated in their own right, saying, I don't want to hear any of that crap. I'm going to do the right thing for me because I know the right thing. I'm becoming educated. And they simply go straight to the source. But to change our country, not just an individual farmer-consumer relationship, farm to consumer, but our country as a leadership beacon in the world for being preventing disease, instead of saying 130,000 colostomies a year is normal because of Crohn's. That's all nutrition. It's all inflammation in the gut microbiome. We change that direction by not having so much being paid in intervention in medicine because people are sick. And we let the new mantra be farmers over pharmacies, where you actually put farmers and the whole food nutrition of farming over pharmaceuticals. We need good pharmaceuticals, no question. They're going to do a great thing with this whole vaccine. That's fantastic. But we need to build good, strong immune systems so we don't get sick the next time around from whatever it might be, because the dynamics of adaptation have been retarded in the world. We need to be able to adapt to the challenges and survive them because of our own genome, our own functioning genome, microbiome, versus a drug we have to wait and take. I'm sorry, mankind did not have drugs for all time. It had food for all time. So we really need to spend 90% of our time of preventing, so we don't have as much food, much energy and money spent in trying to cure afterwards. We're going to go bankrupt as a nation if we always concentrate on trying to cure after we're sick. We need to prevent so we can be strong and healthy, and then we can have that 10% of our whatever we need to do go in and do surgeries and all those things, which are important,
Right.
But they should be a lesser emphasis. That we need to be really making sure we have universal good food for our children in school so they can think and they don't create crimes. They're not going crazy, right? And we need to start thinking about all kinds of other things that are assuring that our brains are working because our guts are working, the gut-brain connection. We've seen this in prison analysis where people start being fed better in prison. Their recidivism rate drops like a rock because they function better. They're no longer a criminal in their gut-brain connection. They're doing much better after they get out of prison. So the story can go on and on and on. Right. But if I had $100 million, I would try to emphasize the influence of prevention through nutrition, farmers over pharmacies.
That's a great answer. And 2 more questions. If you could send a text to everybody in the world, what would be that message?
Food is medicine. Love your neighbor.
All right. And lastly, Mark, where can people find you?
Well, I'm here at Organic Pastures Dairy, Raw Farm, here in Fresno, California. We love people to come visit us. We have an on-farm store. We're also in all the Sprout stores. We're the #1 selling fluid milk brand in California. Whether you're pasteurized or raw, we're #1, which is pretty cool.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We're in Lassen's and Nugget Markets and Air One. And you go to our website, Raw Farm, you can see a website locator map to show where all the stores are. It's about 500 stores in California that carry our product. And nationally, there's about 1,500 stores that carry our raw cheese. But I would also encourage you, this is not about me, it's about we. And I would encourage everyone to reach out and start trying to source their foods more holistically, whether that be organic or whether that be or unprocessed or a combination of both, more farm direct, and learn to cook and understand that food is medicine, and a connection closer to the soil is so important. And that, yeah, modern medicine is a miracle. It's fantastic. But I tell you what, it will not cure us from having a problem with the failure of our immune systems in America. We must build our immune system, and that's based in gut microbiome nourishment.
Mark from Organic Pastures, thank you so much for your time.
It's been my honor, and thank you for sharing the word.
I appreciate it.
Okay, buddy.